My name is Ron, and for 15 years, my wife Lily and I shared what I thought was a happy and fulfilling marriage. Our life together was a source of immense joy, and I cherished the love and companionship Lily provided. We had two wonderful daughters, and both enjoyed stable, successful careers. Lily as a translator for a film studio, and I as a security guard. I was deeply in love with my wife, convinced of her unwavering devotion to me. We lived comfortably in a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood, and our family seemed to embody happiness and success. After the birth of our second daughter, Lily struggled with her weight, but her striking blue eyes still captivated me. She opted for glasses instead of contacts, as they made reading and working more comfortable for her. Those glasses, with their large frames, only highlighted the allure of her eyes, which I found even more attractive. My love for her never wavered, and I was certain she loved me just as deeply. Our bond appeared unbreakable, and the contentment of our little family, financially stable and emotionally close, felt perfect. But all of that changed after 15 years of what I believed was a harmonious marriage. In the past few years, Lily had developed a new habit of going out with her female colleagues after work on Fridays. They'd visit different pubs, rotating through their favorite spots. Lily always reassured me that these outings were harmless, just a chance to relax and unwind with friends. I never objected. After all, I worked long shifts and often returned home in the early morning. On those evenings, I took charge of our daughters, cooking dinner and helping them with their homework, which I genuinely enjoyed. Lily usually returned home around 8 p.m., allowing us to still enjoy our weekends together as a family. Saturdays were particularly special, as we always had dinner together, savoring those moments of unity. I believed everything was fine, until one fateful day shattered the illusion of the perfect life we had built. In recent months, however, something began to shift. Lily started coming home later than she used to on the nights she spent out with her friends. Instead of returning by 8 p.m. like before, she began arriving closer to 10 p.m., and I could tell she had had a few drinks. Although I noticed the change, I didn't voice my concerns. After all, she still seemed like the loving and devoted wife that she had always been. Every time she walked through the door, her face lit up with that familiar smile, and it made me want to wrap her in a hug. I convinced myself that these nights out were just her way of blowing off steam after a long work week. Her time with friends seemed harmless and gave her a chance to relax. Even with her late returns, I felt there was no reason to worry. But a few weeks ago, everything changed. It was a Monday morning when I received an unexpected email from an anonymous sender who simply identified themselves as a friend. At first, I was tempted to delete it without reading, assuming it was spam. However, something made me pause, and out of curiosity, I decided to open the message. The contents hit me like a punch to the gut. The message read, "I happened to be at the Black Crow this past Friday and noticed your wife there, with a group of people. She seemed to be having a great time, but what caught my attention was that she was dancing almost exclusively with a particular man from her company. If you're curious, I took a picture on my phone. Have a look, and if you still feel there's nothing to worry about, then feel free to ignore this email." Attached to the message was a file, a photo. My heart raced as I debated whether to open it. Why would someone send me something like this if there was nothing to it? The doubts were already creeping in, and the thought of Lily dancing with a man I had never heard of weighed heavily on me. I had always assumed Lily only went out with her female colleagues, but now, the idea that she might have been spending time with someone else, even if just a harmless dance, stirred an unsettling feeling inside me. With a lump in my throat and my heart pounding, I hesitated, but my curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on the attachment. When the image loaded on my screen, it was clear that the photographer had taken it discreetly, as the shot wasn't perfectly centered. In the background, I could make out a group of people, Lily's colleagues, both men and women, gathered around a long table. Though the picture was slightly blurry, it was still easy to spot my wife on the right side of the dance floor. She was wearing a beige blouse with red flowers and green leaves, paired with brown trousers, exactly what she had worn the last time she went out with her friends. It became obvious that the photo was from last Friday, the night she came home later than usual, around 10:30 p.m., and greeted me with a warm hug and an intense look. As I examined the image further, something caught my attention. Lily had a joyful smile on her face, but she was wrapped tightly in the arms of a tall young man. Her hands were around his neck, and they were pressed closely together, almost intertwined. It shocked me to see my wife in such an intimate position with someone else. In all our years together, I couldn't recall her ever dancing with me in public like that, nor behaving that way with any other man. The lower half of his body was firmly pressed against hers, and I couldn't help but imagine the physical sensations he must have been experiencing. It was clear that there was an attraction, and the way they moved together left no room for doubt. What disturbed me the most was Lily's expression. She didn't seem surprised or uncomfortable by the closeness. Instead, she looked pleased, her smile suggesting she was fully engaged in the moment. When their eyes met in the picture, it made me sick to my core. Here was my wife, the mother of our 2 daughters, openly displaying affection with another man in a public place. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I knew without question that she would never have danced with me like that. So why was she allowing a complete stranger to be so close to her? Suddenly, I was hit with a nagging question. Was he truly a stranger? Doubt flooded my mind, and no matter how hard I tried to push it away, it grew stronger. Different scenarios involving my wife and this unfamiliar man began to take shape in my head, each one more disturbing than the last. I felt a wave of nausea rise within me. Overwhelmed, I rushed to the bathroom and vomited the breakfast I had eaten earlier that morning. Confusion clouded my mind as I watched Lily, my wife, act in a way that hinted at something far more intimate than I had ever imagined. Could she really be having an affair? The thought was unbearable. How could she betray me, betray our 2 daughters? A flood of questions raced through my head, but one stood out above the rest. Who was this man? I couldn't shake the feeling that he was someone from her workplace. How long had this secret been brewing right under my nose? What could have driven her to engage in such a deceitful relationship? The thought that she may have already crossed the line filled me with a sickening dread. Determined to uncover the truth, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I needed solid evidence before jumping to conclusions. For the next half hour, I obsessively tried to piece together more information about Lily's recent behavior, searching for any clues I might have missed. In an attempt to calm down and clear my head, I retreated to the bathroom, where I was consumed by a storm of conflicting emotions: disappointment, sorrow, anger. All of these feelings swirled inside me, stirring up an almost overwhelming urge for revenge. I vacillated between extremes. One minute, I wanted to confront Lily, to let all my frustration and hurt pour out. The next, I found myself longing to hold her, to plead with her to end whatever was happening with this man. Divorce seemed like a real option at one point, but then, just as quickly, I found myself contemplating forgiveness, imagining giving her a second chance. As I sat there, my head spinning with these erratic thoughts, I questioned my own sanity. How had it come to this? Finally, after what felt like hours of inner turmoil, I managed to regain a semblance of control over my emotions. I knew acting impulsively would only make things worse. I needed to watch and wait to gather more evidence before confronting her. I couldn't afford to let my emotions cloud my judgment. Patience was key. For now, I would hold back and carefully observe Lily's behavior, biding my time until I had all the facts. At the same time, I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what. I needed solid proof. Was she truly being unfaithful, or was I overreacting to her newfound social freedom? Yet, I couldn't ignore the fact that Lily had been hiding the full extent of her outings with friends. I realized that her workplace was only a few blocks from mine, and with my frequent business trips, it was relatively easy to keep an eye on her without raising suspicion. The next day, around 11:30 a.m., I discreetly parked at the far end of her office parking lot, using the tinted windows of my company car as cover. I stayed there, quietly watching the exit, waiting to see if anything unusual happened. But until 1 p.m., there was no sign of her. I kept up this pattern for the rest of the week, carefully timing my stakeouts. Finally, on Friday at 12:15 p.m., I saw her. She walked out with 3 colleagues, 2 men and a woman, and climbed into a black BMW, taking the front passenger seat next to the driver. I immediately decided to follow. As I discreetly tailed them through the busy streets, they eventually stopped at an upscale restaurant. From my vantage point across the street, I watched as Lily and her group entered, laughing and looking relaxed. They emerged 2 hours later at 2 p.m., and my heart sank when I saw her walking closely beside a tall blonde man, the same one from the photo. There was a playful ease between them that stoked my anger. They returned to her workplace, the same camaraderie on display, and disappeared inside. Up until this point, Lily hadn't crossed any serious lines, aside from not being fully honest with me. She often had lunch with colleagues, both male and female, but what struck me was the closeness she shared with this man. It wasn't just a work lunch. It felt more personal. Adding to my unease was the fact that she skipped her usual Friday night outing with her female coworkers. Instead, she returned home at 5:15 p.m., cheerful and full of her usual warmth. Her ability to hide what I had seen left me in disbelief. Later that evening, while we sat in front of the TV, I couldn't resist asking about her day and lunch. For a brief second, she hesitated, then smoothly responded, claiming she had eaten a tuna sandwich she'd packed from home. It was a blatant lie, and my anger flared, but the moment she looked at me with those familiar blue eyes, my emotions became conflicted. I felt resentment, but also a powerful urge to hold her close, even though I knew she was lying. I knew I had to keep my cool. Pressing her too hard or acting impulsively could backfire, so I made the decision to shift the conversation and talk about my own workday, keeping things light. Lily didn't seem to sense the tension or the depth of my suspicions. She was affectionate that evening, behaving as if nothing had changed, as if she was the loving wife she had always been. The weekend arrived, and we decided to take our daughters to the zoo. For a brief time, I was able to forget the turmoil inside me, enjoying the simple pleasures of laughter and family. The joy on our daughters' faces made me feel like everything was normal, at least for now. Throughout the week, I refrained from monitoring her whereabouts during lunch, as I planned to track her down on Friday evening after work. When my daughters returned home at 3:15 on Friday, I was already there and eagerly awaited their return. I ordered pizza for them, ensuring their happiness, and explained that I had some business at the office. I left them both. My daughters had become quite independent, and I calmly left them alone in the house, provided they locked the doors. I knew they would be sound asleep in their room by the time I got back. Without hesitation, I got into the car and headed to Lily's workplace, arriving there at 5 o'clock. Observing from a distance, I noticed how she drove out of the parking lot, heading in the opposite direction of our house, indicating her intention to meet her friends at the pub for an evening party. It was not difficult to follow her unnoticed, as a line of 6 cars served as a convenient shield for my car en route. My wife's Toyota seamlessly merged with other cars heading to various venues like a pub, a gathering place, or a dance hall, depending on one's perspective. 10 minutes later, I spotted Lily's Toyota along with 6 other cars entering the parking lot adjacent to an establishment known as the Glass Shoe, which uniquely combined a bar and a restaurant. Choosing to remain discreet, I parked the car at the far end of the parking lot, carefully observing the surroundings from the side. After everyone entered the establishment, I exited the car and took a leisurely stroll around the vicinity. It seemed prudent to gather as much information as possible about the place my wife frequented. The pub stood a distance away from other buildings, surrounded on all sides by a parking lot. 2 of its walls faced the street, as the pub occupied a corner space, while the other 2 sides were marked by a neatly trimmed cedar fence standing 5 feet high, in front of which parking spaces were available. At that point, I noticed a black BMW from the group, the same one Lily had used to go to the restaurant the previous Friday. Surprisingly, it was now parked prominently in front of the cedar hedge, distinguishing it from the other cars parked outside the building. Upon closer examination, I realized that the building had two different entrances, one leading to the restaurant and the other to a bar situated at the back. Both the bar and the restaurant had fur doors intended strictly for emergencies. On the opposite side, where most of the cars were parked, there was an additional entrance. Moreover, there was another entrance leading to the bar, but Lily's company did not use it. Instead, they chose the entrance leading to the restaurant part of the building. Returning to the car, I grabbed the outfit I had prepared for this moment. Quickly, I changed into a black windbreaker, pulled on a baseball cap, and put on glasses to subtly alter my appearance. To further disguise myself, I inserted a mouthpiece that slightly changed my facial structure, similar to a boxer's guard. Though it made speaking and drinking difficult, I didn't mind. I wasn't there to talk or have a drink. A quick glance in the rearview mirror assured me that I was sufficiently unrecognizable. After waiting in the car for another hour, I finally entered the bar. Scanning the room, I spotted Lily sitting with a group near the dance floor, laughing and enjoying drinks. The group consisted of 6 women and 4 men, including Lily. My heart sank when I noticed she was seated close to the same man she had met for dinner the previous Friday. The sight stirred a deep sense of sadness and suspicion within me. Wanting to distance myself, I chose a table in a shadowy corner, as far from them as possible. From this hidden spot, I began to closely observe the evening's events. The area I selected was dimly lit, occupied by others who seemed lost in their own thoughts, much like I was. I felt confident that I could remain unnoticed there. Within minutes, the music started, drawing people to the dance floor. Before I could look away, I saw Lily dancing with the man who had been sitting beside her. The remaining 3 men at the table exchanged knowing smiles as they watched them dance, confirming my worst fears. There was clearly something between them. As the hours passed, the group gradually thinned out until only Lily, another woman, and 2 men remained. Eventually, both couples made their way to the dance floor, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind that Lily and this man were more than just friends. I watched as he pulled Lily closer, his hands resting on her waist, the scene before me solidifying the painful truth I had been dreading. They moved together on the dance floor, their bodies pressed closely as they swayed in subtle rhythm. I watched as he leaned down to kiss her, whispering something in her ear. Lily responded with a nod, and without hesitation they left the room hand in hand. Intrigued and suspicious, I quietly followed them out into the dark street. I trailed behind, observing as they walked together to his car. I kept my distance, watching as they got into the back seat. It was clear why he had parked his car in the last row near the cedar hedge. It provided privacy, away from prying eyes. With no other cars nearby, the hedge served as a shield, giving them a false sense of security. My mind raced, curiosity gnawing at me. How far was Lily willing to go? Determined to find out, I cautiously made my way to the opposite end of the parking lot. Stealthily moving between parked cars, I made sure to stay unnoticed. Before I knew it, I was standing next to the back of his black car. At first, I couldn't see anyone inside, and it dawned on me that they were likely in the back seat. The dim light near the hedge made it nearly impossible for them to see me from inside the car, so I edged closer and leaned toward one of the rear windows. Unfortunately, the heavily tinted glass obscured my view, but I could still make out muffled voices coming from within. I was torn. Should I intervene immediately or wait to catch Lily in the act? The decision tormented me, but time was running out. Just then, the car began to rock in time with the music playing, which, to my dismay, was one of Lily's favorite songs. Anger surged through me, and without thinking, I yanked the door handle, flooding the car with light from the interior lamp. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. There was my wife, Lily, lying on her back with her lover atop her. They were lost in their illicit activities when I quietly removed my glasses and the prosthetic that had disguised my identity. As the car's interior lights illuminated, Lily's eyes widened in shock as recognition set in. Her expression quickly shifted from contentment to utter disbelief. A moment later, she managed to speak, her voice shaky and uncertain. "Oh my God, Ron, please forgive me," she whispered. "Don't make any hasty decisions you'll regret. It meant nothing to me. Just wait, please." I closed the car door firmly behind me and headed straight to my vehicle. As I drove away, I saw Lily running after me, desperately pleading for me to stop. Barely 5 minutes later, she arrived home, disheveled and with tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God, honey, I'm so sorry," she cried. "I love you more than anything in this world. I know I've hurt you." "Lily, you shattered our marriage vows after 15 years together. I've never betrayed you. If I had known you were cheating, maybe I would have looked for comfort elsewhere too. If fidelity doesn't matter in our marriage, then perhaps I would have sought out fleeting pleasures," I replied, my voice thick with anger. "Ron, please listen to me," she begged. "I love you with all my heart. What I did meant nothing to me. If I could turn back time and undo it all, I would. You have to believe that you are my world. Nothing compares to the life we've built together and our daughters." Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to keep her composure. She buried her face in her hands, searching for some semblance of solace. Eventually, her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the sofa, continuing to apologize over and over again. "Stop apologizing," I said sternly. "What you did to our marriage is unforgivable. Tell me who he is and how long this has been going on," I demanded, relieved that she was no longer standing right in front of me. My anger surged, and I grabbed her by the neck, shaking her, as an unfamiliar rage took hold of me. "His name is Nick," she confessed, her voice trembling. "He's a colleague from the studio. This shouldn't have happened. Please believe me, I love you more than anything." But then, a dreadful thought crossed my mind. "Admit your deception," I retorted. "You've been lying to me about your outings with friends, secretly seeing him for years. Do you really expect me to believe you haven't been deceiving me all this time?" In a panic, she exclaimed, "Oh my God, no! This only started recently. Please believe me. My love for you has only grown stronger over time. I'm begging for your forgiveness and understanding." "There was never any genuine love in what I did," Lily sobbed, tears once again welling up in her already swollen, red-rimmed eyes. Her disheveled appearance only underscored the seriousness of the situation. She begged for forgiveness. "No, you don't understand the gravity of this, Lily," I replied, my voice thick with disappointment. "Think about your colleagues who know about your affair. Think about us. What will people say if they see us together, whether on the street or at work? This isn't just some secret anymore. It's a blatant public betrayal. You've humiliated me, and I can't endure this any longer. I want a divorce." My decision to end our marriage felt unshakable. "Ron, please," she pleaded desperately. "I'm begging you, forgive me. You know I can't live without you. Please reconsider. I'm truly asking for your forgiveness. I swear, it will never happen again." She spoke of saving our marriage and protecting our family, but I turned away, needing space to process everything. "Lily, our marriage started to crumble the moment you chose to be unfaithful. What we're dealing with now is the result of your betrayal." Suddenly, a sharp scream shattered the tension in the room, followed by heart-wrenching sobs that cut through me. When I looked back, I saw Lily collapsed on the floor, her head buried in her hands as she wept uncontrollably. In that moment, conflicting emotions battled within me. Part of me wanted to hold her, to comfort her, but the anger and sense of betrayal were too overwhelming. I couldn't bring myself to stay near her, unsure if I could trust my own emotions. Silently, I left the house and checked into a hotel for the night. Sleep was elusive, my mind churning with the events that had unfolded. By morning, I had decided to inform my secretary that I wouldn't be coming into work. I remained in the hotel room until noon, trying to make sense of everything. Eventually, I ventured to the hotel restaurant and ate a small meal, my appetite almost non-existent. With a heavy heart, I finally made my way to the office. As I drove, I couldn't resist glancing towards our house. To my surprise, there was a green Toyota parked outside, a vehicle I didn't recognize, which only added to my anxiety. After a moment, I realized it must belong to Francine, Lily's sister. The thought of my daughters having their aunt there to support them, given their mother's unfaithfulness, brought me a small measure of comfort. But I was still unaware of just how dire Lily's condition had become. The night before, after I had left, Lily had confided in Francine over the phone, the weight of everything crashing down on her, leading to a complete breakdown. Now, she was in the hospital, struggling to cope with the aftermath of her emotional collapse. I didn't learn of this until I reached my office and received a call from Francine. She explained that Lily was in a critical state, constantly crying and racked with anxiety. What shocked me most was that less than an hour after I left, our elder daughter had contacted Francine, telling her that Lily seemed delusional and that I wasn't home. Alarmed, Francine had rushed over, only to find her sister in a terrible state. Recognizing the severity of the situation, she had immediately called an ambulance. Francine assured me that she would remain at my house to care for and support our two daughters during this difficult time. She strongly urged me to visit Lily at Santa Maria City Hospital. As our conversation ended, a wave of shock washed over me. The realization of how selfish and dismissive I had been the previous night hit hard. The weight of my actions, or lack thereof, pressed down on me. Had I truly chosen to abandon my home, leaving my daughters and wife when they needed me most? Perhaps, but one thing became clear. If I had stayed with her that night, the immense pain caused by her betrayal might have driven me to act with cruelty. While Lily may have been largely responsible for the breakdown of our marriage, I had never considered myself someone who shied away from problems or avoided facing them head-on until yesterday. Was that what I had done? We were confronted with a monumental issue, certainly one of great significance, but was walking out on my family in their time of need the only way to justify my decision? Regret and guilt overwhelmed me, deepening my sense of sorrow. Tears welled up in my eyes as I hid behind the desk, wondering if there could have been another way, a path of forgiveness, reconciliation, and perhaps a distant hope of salvaging what remained of our relationship. Of course, we found ourselves in this situation because of Lily's actions. She bore full responsibility for betraying the sacred trust that should have been reserved solely for me. But the thought of ending our marriage weighed heavily on my heart, knowing the profound pain it would inflict on our two beloved daughters. It became clear that I needed to consider an alternative, and I began to contemplate the idea of forgiveness. As the shock of Lily's hospitalization began to sink in, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Without hesitation, I got behind the wheel and sped to the hospital, driven by a need to uncover the truth about her actions and to understand the situation fully. Doubts lingered in my mind as I approached the hospital, unsure of what I would say to Lily, or even what I hoped to achieve. But one thing was certain. I was determined to seek the truth. As I sat in the hospital waiting, I recalled a piece of wisdom my mother had once shared with me. Cheaters eventually face the consequences of their actions. This thought continues to linger in my mind as I reflect on my wife's betrayal. Lily and I married when she was just 20, and at the time, our life together seemed like a dream come true. Our two cherished daughters filled our days with joy, and our cozy home in a beautiful neighborhood symbolized the happiness we shared. We faced no financial struggles, and above all, our love felt unshakable. However, life took an unexpected turn when, shortly after our younger daughter turned 6, Lily began working at a nearby film studio. With her fluency in several foreign languages, she secured a position as a translator for films. Her skills in voice translation were outstanding, providing us with a sense of financial security. For 5 years, she thrived in her role until a new translator joined the studio. This new colleague, tall, charismatic, and blonde, quickly became the focus of attention at work. Despite the numerous admirers he attracted, he seemed indifferent to their interest. Sharing Lily's expertise in multiple languages, they frequently crossed paths at work, and a friendship gradually formed, which soon deepened. This was where the trouble began. subtly gnawing at Lily's heart. Love crept in before she fully recognized it, leaving her in a state of inner turmoil. Before long, she realized she had fallen for him. Initially, he treated her no differently than any other coworker, maintaining a professional demeanor focused solely on their work. But as he began joining their bi-weekly outings, something shifted. What started as a professional relationship gradually transformed into a closer friendship. They began to confide in one another, sharing the intimate details of their lives. Lily kept all of this from me. Soon, he became a regular at the gatherings and dinners with her female colleagues. Her first mistake was failing to inform me when men started joining these outings. Over time, their connection deepened. On the dance floor, moving in rhythm to the slow songs, they felt inseparable. Yet, I remained unaware of how deep their bond had grown. In a dimly lit corner of the dance floor, Lily found herself in his arms, and when their lips met, it was far more than just a friendly kiss. It was a kiss that shook her to the core, setting off a chain of events that would change everything. The following Friday, during one of their usual outings, he found an excuse to draw Lily away from the pub, leading to a moment of heated passion in his car. Their desires quickly overtook them, and they found themselves entangled like wild animals in the back seat. Overcome with guilt, Lily returned home determined to shower me with the love and affection I deserved, though she failed to recognize that what I truly needed was her unwavering loyalty. However, their constant interactions at work made it increasingly difficult for her to distance herself from him. They had grown too accustomed to each other's presence, yet Lily's love for me remained steadfast. She was convinced that she would sacrifice anything for Ron, believing that her love for him was unbreakable. Lily never intended to hurt me with her infidelity, but she was gravely mistaken in thinking that her connection with him could ever surpass the bond we shared. This affair continued for 4 months, and now she lay in a hospital bed, confessing all the details of her betrayal. I listened silently, tears streaming down my face. Lily promised to do whatever it took to save our marriage, but deep down I was unsure if I could live with the memories of her betrayal, though I couldn't bring myself to say it. After all, my wife was in a fragile state, both emotionally and physically, and I didn't want to cause her any more pain. Returning to my hotel room, I contacted my lawyer, instructing him to prepare the divorce papers. My concern for Lily's well-being weighed heavily on my mind. I didn't want her to suffer, but it seemed inevitable. As the divorce papers were being drafted, I spent time with my beloved daughters, knowing that although I didn't plan to seek full custody, Lily and I would need to co-parent, even if it meant living apart. However, my plans took an unexpected turn when my lawyer delivered the divorce papers to Lily while she was still in the hospital. Her condition worsened upon learning of my decision, and that day marked a tragic turning point. She suffered a stroke when she realized I had initiated divorce proceedings. When her doctor informed me, I began to despise myself. I should have waited until she had fully recovered before moving forward with the divorce. I spent the next 3 days by her side, holding her hand as her condition deteriorated. Even after 2 months, Lily showed only partial improvement, left paralyzed on her left side. It was a heartbreaking situation for all of us. I blamed myself entirely, yet I knew that if Lily had never embarked on that secret affair with her colleague, none of this would have happened. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself to stay in the same house with Lily and our daughters, I just couldn't do it. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded of that moment of betrayal in the car. So I packed my things and moved into a nearby rented apartment to stay close to my daughters. As much as I didn't want things to turn out this way, it was Lily's actions that had thrown our once happy life into disarray.